Chapter 1381. Hector shrugged. Everything has been fine apart from the difficulty I faced at the beginning because of the language barrier. However, after being there for a long time, I made friends, and things improved over time. She smiled. That sounds great. By the way, what's your friend's name? You should invite him to Zlokova someday in the future. I'll have to treat him to a meal for you. His name is Eric. By the way, his father used to be a shareholder of Luxella. I wonder if you'd know the father. Maisie was startled. Which shareholder of Luxella? Hector replied, his father's name is Harry Knowles. Maisie was astonished for a split second and then burst into laughter all of a sudden. He turns out to be Mr. Knowles' son. Then you're truly a lucky bastard. Mr. Knowles has always been very friendly to others, and his connections in Staslo are also very strong. The apple never falls far from the tree, so the son that he brought up would naturally be as great as the father. It can only be said that Hector is indeed very fortunate. It's said that birds of a feather flock together. Making excellent friends has always been considered as collecting wealth on one's path to success, while messing around with bad friends will only impede his chance of succeeding. This sounds very brutal and real, because it's the reality. After the two of them had breakfast, when they were paying the bills at the cashier, they encountered Tanner and a woman, who were coming in their direction. Tanner was holding a child in one hand and the woman in the other. The whole scene looked very warm and blissful. Maisie did not recognize the woman, who was Pearl, but she was a little surprised when she saw this scene. Seeing Maisie, Pearl was stunned and stopped moving for a moment. Tanner turned around and looked at her. Maisie's gaze was fixed on their interlocked hands. Because of Pearl's matter, Tanner has never had an affair with any other woman in the past 3 years, and it's even more impossible for him to have a child of this age. Therefore, Pearl is the only one that he would treat with such care nowadays. Maisie greeted them with a polite smile, followed Hector as he turned and was about to leave, walked past the couple, and left the diner. Pearl turned her head. Maisie. Maisie stopped, turned around slowly, and glanced at Pearl. Pearl let go of Tanner's hand and walked toward her. I wish to talk to you. Maisie took a glance at Tanner, and it did not look like he was going to stop her from doing so. Thus, she gave off a smile. Okay. Maisie and Pearl walked to the French windows in the corridor. The plants outside the window looked so green and lively, bringing a different view to the rooftops around the city. Pearl looked out the window and said slowly, you wanted to see me 3 years ago, but I didn't agree to meet you back then. Maisie turned to look at her. I know. I used to hate you, but I don't hate you anymore. I just don't have the courage to face you. Pearl turned around and stared at Maisie. Because I'll think of those things that happened and the things that I did back then whenever I see you. I thought I'd find relief by hiding from you. That's why I avoided meeting you cowardly. Maisie. She called her name. I can finally face you now. Maisie stepped forward, stretched out her arms, and hugged her. Pearl was astounded, and the darkness in her heart faded gradually as if the dark clouds that were overcasting the rainy sky disappeared after the rain. It was replaced by a rainbow slashing across the now clear sky. Maisie smiled and comforted her. You've done a great job. Pearl's eyes turned bloodshot immediately. She could finally bid her past self goodbye, and no longer needed to live with the guilt. It rained very frequently during the hot summer. Especially after the sweltering heat, there was always heavy rain. Nolan stood in front of the French window with an arm akimbo, holding a mug of coffee. The rain outside the window was so heavy that it almost clouded the surrounding scenery. Quincy walked into the office and stood behind him after knocking on the door. Mr. Goldman, the representative of Hannigan Incorporated, has come and left. Nolan turned around. What did they say? Chapter 1382. Quincy scratched his head and expressed his doubts. They claimed it's to express their gratitude. They actually handed the development rights of the Bronze Bay Hotel to us. Mr. Goldman, do enlighten me, what is Tanner thinking? Could it be that he's so happy because Pearl and his son have returned to him? Nolan put the coffee on the desk. He's not doing so to thank me. Quincy was startled. Is he not? He laughed. He's thanking Z. After saying so, Nolan lifted his gaze. Z was able to make Pearl let go of her past completely. And Pearl has agreed to marry Tanner by the end of the year. Quincy was stunned. She's agreed to get married to him, and he's so happy that he's on the verge of losing his mind? Nolan sat on the leather chair. Pearl didn't plan to marry him originally, but she agreed to it in the end. So, how can he not be happy? Quincy finally understood the whole concept. So, Tanner is thanking Mrs. Goldman because she helped him to marry the love of his life? And because of that, he's handing such a huge project over to Black Gold? It turns out that Mrs. Goldman is quite a pro. If she were to work under Black Gold as a sales representative, her performance would be off the charts. Maisie was standing outside the door at some point, so she could not help but knock on the door. Hey, I heard you guys talking about me behind my back before I entered the door. Quincy turned his head and explained immediately, the discussion isn't something bad, Mrs. Goldman. We were praising you. Nolan sneered. Maisie walked to the couch and sat down. Quincy, go make some tea. Quincy nodded fawningly. Yes, I'm on it right now. He then left the office. Nolan got up, walked toward her, stood in front of her, leaned over, and propped his arms against the back of the chair behind her. It's raining so heavily, and you've purposely come to see me. Maisie chuckled and gently pulled his tie. Haven't you heard that famous saying? Nolan's lips approached her. And what saying is that? She wrapped her arms around his neck. Humans tend to miss someone more when it rains. His smile intensified as he turned over, picked her up, and placed her on his thighs. Did you just come back BH from Pearl's? She pouted. Yes, and they forced a free romance play onto me while I was there. Nolan laughed. So, is that why you thought of me? After all, I'm also a woman who has a husband to start a romance play. Maisie threw herself into his arms and was about to do something to him when Quincy pushed the door open and entered the room with tea. Mrs. Goldman, I've finished making tea. That was how Quincy was forbidden from stepping into the office again today. A week passed in the blink of an eye. Daisy came to watch the high schoolers' basketball game in the school, and the entire hall almost had a full house. Just as she was looking around for them, someone called her, "Little Angel, this way." Her seat was in the front row, which was indeed the best seat one could get if a good view were of top priority. Seeing her approaching them, the senior sitting next to Zafir took the initiative to give up his seat. You can sit here. Daisy sat down and looked around. Why do I feel like everyone here is from higher grades? She had not seen anyone from the same grade as her so far. Zafir turned to look at her and gave off a warm smile. Not many people from junior high came. Daisy stared at him. Is that so? The senior sitting next to her chuckled. You're the only one who came. Her expression dimmed instantly. You lied to me? How can you live with that? After saying so, she turned around and glared at Zafir. And you, too, joined forces with them and lied to me. Zafir rubbed her head. Don't worry, the high schoolers' basketball game is indeed open to the public, so it's okay for us to bring you here. The other senior sitting on the side agreed. Yes, some of our classmates even brought their family members along. You were invited here by Zafir, so there won't be an issue. Chapter 1383. After the 2-hour game, Daisy followed Zafir out of the basketball court. Daisy turned around and looked at him. Brother Zafir, do you want to play basketball too? Zafir smiled. I'm fine with not playing. Wasn't your illness healed long ago? If you want to play, then just do it. Daisy placed her hands behind her as if she was giving Zafir a piece of advice. The two seniors, who played in the game, had changed out of their jerseys. They approached them and wrapped their arms around Zafir's shoulder. Your brother Zafir is a super scholar. All he does is focus on his studies. Playing basketball doesn't suit him at all. Zafir pursed his lips and gave off a smile. Daisy crossed her arms and looked at the two of them. Why doesn't it suit him? The two seniors exchanged glances and laughed out loud. If your brother Zafir can do everything that you throw at him, how do you expect ordinary boys like us to survive high school? He's handsome, filthy rich, and a top student at the same time. He's already the top gun among all the 1%ers of this high school. What would we have to do if he were to become proficient in sports? Zafir looked at them. Don't you guys have tuition classes to attend in the afternoon? Why are you still standing here? Tisk, all right, we'll leave now. The two seniors then said goodbye to Daisy with a smile. Little angel, we're leaving already. See you around. Daisy also waved to them. Zafir sent Daisy to the school gate. It was a weekend today, so most students were on holiday, and only very few could be seen. Although there were a few students, most of them were only there for the tuition classes. The car that came to pick up Daisy was parked not far away, and Daisy turned around and asked, Brother Zafir, do you want me to send you back? Zafir raised his hand and rubbed her head. Nah, my father will come to pick me up later. You should go back first. Daisy nodded. Okay, then I'll go first. She took a few steps forward, looked back at Zafir, and waved with a grin. Zafir could not help but laugh when he saw her figure trotting toward the car. Daisy just got in the car, only to find out that Colton was actually in the car, and she was stunned. Colton, you're here? Colton retracted his gaze from the rearview mirror and took off his earphones. I'm here because I'm worried about you, you idiot. Brother Zafir and I were watching the game. What's there to worry about? She was puzzled. But after saying so, she realized something, startled, and asked, Colton, how did you know that I would be here to watch the game today? Colton shook his head and stared at her. Guess who told me about it? Daisy frowned. It was actually very easy to get to the bottom of the question. After all, it could not have been leaked by Zafir or those two seniors as they did not have any contact with Colton. Thus, apart from herself, only Lisa knew about the game. However, she did not blame Lisa, but spoke up for her. She's probably worried about me too. That's why she told you about this. Colton scoffed. He did not even bother to utter another word and put on his earphones again. She'll only learn her lesson when she gets to see Lisa's true colors. Mr. Fraser was cooking dinner at home when Evan rushed in and kicked open the door of Lisa's room. Lisa, you're the one who did this, right? Mr. Fraser quickly put down all the utensils in his hands, walked out of the kitchen, and saw Evan grabbing Lisa's hair and dragging her out of the room. Evan Fraser, what in the hell are you doing to your sister? My sister? Evan pushed Lisa to the floor, stood in place with his arms akimbo, and scoffed angrily. He then pointed at her angrily. Whose younger sister would find someone to beat up her brother? I was beaten out of the blue and was hospitalized for a week. I didn't expect that my sister was actually the one who hired someone to do so. Chapter 1384. Mr. Fraser was momentarily stunned. He looked at Lisa, who was sitting on the floor, without saying a word. Lily, did you really do that? Lisa's expression looked sullen, but she did not utter a single word. Evan did not have a target to vent his anger, so he could only kick the cabinet beside him. The items displayed in the cabinet swayed and fell to the floor, creating a series of loud noises. Look at the obedient daughter that you brought up. I didn't expect that she would have the guts and ability to come up with such a scheme. Evan, just shut up. There you go. You're starting to get all biased again. Evan scoffed, clicked his tongue, and said straightforwardly, in order to fulfill your precious daughter's vanity, you have to spend more money to send her to a noble junior high, but I don't think she's learned anything. No, I think the only thing that she's picked up from the school is bribing others. She's even outdone me in that department. Mr. Fraser's expression dimmed, and he did not say anything. At that moment, Lisa got up abruptly and rushed out. Lily. As the sunset faded and darkness took over the sky, Lisa was walking on the street. The neon lights on the side of the road lit up gradually and began to embellish the dark environment. Even the shops were brightly lit. She took out her cell phone and logged into her social media account. More than a dozen fans realized that she had not updated her news feed for some time, and they had started urging her to update her feed. She merely took a glance at the messages and put the phone back in her pocket irritably. A sedan stopped at the entrance of a hotel at that moment, and the woman who got out of the car had a 2.5-year-old girl in her arms, while the man who came out of the car after the mother and daughter was not wearing a mask. Thus, Lisa recognized him at first glance. It's Helios Boucher, the famous actor who's retired from the facade of the entertainment industry for 3 years. In the 3 years after Helios' retirement, he rarely appeared in front of the public. He had always kept a very low profile, even when he was traveling. Before he quit the industry, whenever he appeared, there would always be a huge crowd, and all of them were his fans. But after retiring from the industry, his itinerary had always been kept a secret and was no longer available to the public. Lisa did not expect to meet the actor Helios Boucher himself in public, so she took out her phone immediately to record a video. After saving the video, she came up with a caption and posted the video on her social media. Unfortunately, she did not know that this action of hers would create an enormous commotion in society. The next day, more than a dozen media outlets were in a mad rush to be the first to report the news that Helios brought his wife and daughter out for dinner. Generally, the more standard and well-known agencies would censor the child's face for fear of causing trouble. However, some less famous reporters chose not to censor the child's face to gain exposure and make a fortune out of this piece of news. The face of Helios' child had been exposed, so many reprimands appeared on the internet over the night, most of which came from Helios fans, who scolded the reporters for disclosing the child's appearance without any authorization. Lisa was sitting in the classroom jotting down notes, and the cell phone in her pocket kept vibrating. She glanced at the podium and saw that the teacher was still lecturing the class with her head down. Thus, she carefully took her cell phone out and discovered that she had received 999 plus notifications on her social media accounts. She tapped on the screen, and all of them were friend requests, but all of them added her only to rebuke her. "Why don't you kill yourself, Princess Lizzie? What a username. Didn't you feel embarrassed and shameful when exposing a video of someone else's child? Young influencers nowadays are just absurd. All they've learned is to piggyback on someone else's popularity? Did your parents teach you that you should aim to grow up to be this kind of person? Little girl, you brought quite a huge trouble onto yourself. All you can do now is wait for a letter of demand." Lisa's hand trembled. She was so frightened that she knocked over the book on the desk, and loud noises shattered the silence in the originally quiet classroom. The classmates sitting in the front half of the class turned to look at her, and the teacher raised her head at this moment and frowned. "Lisa, what are you doing?" Lisa stood up in a panic, and her face paled. Ma'am, I want to go to the bathroom." Seeing that her face looked rather pallid, the teacher nodded. "Hurry up and go." Chapter 1385. Lisa ran out of the classroom in a hurry. When she arrived at the bathroom, she hid in the cubicle and turned on her phone with trembling hands. Half of the netizens who commented on her post scolded her for not having a conscience and being immoral. The people who sent her friend requests were all Helios fans. Upon seeing those unpleasant comments, Lisa sat directly on the toilet bowl as her legs wobbled. She tapped on the browser and searched for entertainment news and information, all of which were occupied by the video she had taken the previous night. She did not expect the video to be reposted by fans and netizens. She was really in the soup now. Meanwhile, the Bouchers contacted the media outlets and asked for the video to be removed immediately. Unfortunately, the child's uncensored appearance had been exposed to all sorts of people worldwide. Even if the articles and video were withdrawn, it was not guaranteed that others would not spread it privately. Beatrice was being carried and held in her grandmother's arms. She was holding a small comb in her hand to comb the hair of the doll in her other hand. She was still young and did not know what was going on. Barbara looked at Helios, who was on the phone while standing in front of the window. After a while, he hung up the phone and turned around. All the articles have been taken off, and those videos that haven't been censored have also been removed from the internet. I believe that this incident will be forgotten after a while, just like any other news. Christina was exasperated. I don't know who in the world can be so immoral. B is still so young. I won't blame that person for taking pictures or recording videos, but the problem is that they should censor the child's face. Helios responded in a heavy tone, this is all on me. It's my negligence. Barbara took his hand. You've been very careful all this while. After all, we didn't know that there'd be someone recording videos nearby. Helios used to travel in cars that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, but he had started driving a very low-profile Mercedes-Benz that cost tens of thousands of dollars ever since he retired from the industry. He sat down beside Barbara and held the back of her hand. If you and Beatrice want to go out, bring a few bodyguards along. She nodded. At this time, Helios' assistant walked into the living room. Mr. Boucher, we found the person who recorded the video and the original platform where the video was uploaded. But... The assistant hesitated. Christina picked up her granddaughter and asked, but what? The assistant handed a tablet to Helios and replied, but the other party seems to be a junior high student. She's studying in a private school, and her photos on her social media accounts feel a little familiar. Not to mention her appearance. After looking at the background of a few photos, Helios immediately realized they were taken at the Goldman mansion. The girl in the photo had retouched her looks in those photos. She looked a little familiar, and the clothes that she was wearing seemed to be Daisy's. Barbara took the tablet from his hand at this time. Let me take a look. She only skimmed through 2 to 3 photos and immediately remembered who it was. Isn't this Daisy's classmate? At Seoul. Maisie went through the social media feed that Barbara showed her. She scrolled from top to bottom and could not help but frown. Barbara rubbed her forehead. I didn't expect it to be that little girl. What in the world is going on? Why would she be wearing Daisy's clothes and watch? I remember the watch in her hand. It's the watch that I gave Daisy as her Christmas gift a while back. Maisie had already heard what Colton said, but she was still a little surprised after seeing these photos. Lisa posted the things Daisy gave her on the internet to show off. To be honest, she was quite heartbroken. However, what hurt her the most was not those precious gifts and the money spent, but the fact that a little girl had not been guided correctly and shown the correct values. Daisy's original intention when giving Lisa all those gifts was only to strengthen their bond. She had once told Maisie she hoped Lisa could be as confident as she was. Chapter 1386. Daisy had everything, so she couldn't understand that when people got something they could never have gotten, they started to think that it would be easy for that to happen again. Maisie put her hand to her forehead because it was her concern. I'll take care of that. Barbara sighed and looked down at her. It's best that you don't do anything and let the teacher or father take over. Daisy loves this friend a lot, so it would be a bad idea for you to take action. Maze looked at the desk, deep in thought, at the private middle and high school. Lisa dragged Daisy to the rooftop in a hurry while looking around. Daisy looked around and back at her. Lisa, are you hiding from someone? Daisy hadn't watched the news, so she wasn't aware of what had happened, and the trend had been replaced, so she wouldn't be able to see anything anymore. Lisa bit her lip and was hesitant for a long time. All the netizens were against her and had found her information, so she was terrified. She didn't want to be under attack because of this. She suddenly grabbed Daisy's hand. I need your help. Daisy looked glad to be able to help. Sure, tell me about it. Lita told her everything, but because she was afraid that Daisy wouldn't help her, she skipped the part about secretly taking pictures. Instead, she said that Helios had accidentally walked into the frame while she was taking selfies. She had supposedly posted the video without realizing who they were. Daisy looked at her, a little surprised. Lisa's eyes welled up with tears. Now, Mr. Boucher's fans are cursing me out, but I didn't mean to do it. I really didn't know that that was him. After that, she started looking at Daisy with puppy eyes. So, could you help me talk to your mom? I know that your mom is close with him, so I'll be fine if she clears the air with him. Daisy agreed without a second thought. After they happily left the rooftop, Colton, who was hiding in a corner, looked annoyed. In the evening, after school, the children returned to the Goldman mansion and bumped into Maisie and Nolan, who were coming down the stairs. Daisy happily pushed her bag into Colton's arms and ran toward Maisie. Mom. When Maisie saw Daisy rushing over to hug her, she squinted. What's going on? Daisy was going to speak when Colton placed their bags on the couch and said, nothing is going on with her. She just wanted to ask you to speak up for Lisa. Daisy paused and looked at Colton in astonishment. Maisie's smile faded a little. Daisy, I know you're close with Lisa, but she exposed BEA's face without prior permission. Do you know how bad that is? Daisy didn't expect her mother to be so serious about it, so she pouted, then lowered her head and said, she said that she didn't mean to do that. Maisie and Nolan looked at each other before placing a hand on her shoulder. What did she tell you? Daisy told Maisie everything, which made her expression darken. She might have believed that Lisa didn't mean to do it if she had not watched the video. But now, only Daisy believed in Lisa. Maisie handed the video to her. This doesn't look like it wasn't intentional, Daisy. I can't help you, and neither can you. Chapter 1387. Daisy looked up, but... Daisy, people need to take credit for their own mistakes. You can't help her for the rest of your life. Maisie stopped the video and looked less stoic. She asked you to speak to me, right? No. Daisy wasn't good at lying because her ears would turn red if she did. Maisie raised her eyebrows. Real friends wouldn't manipulate you. Daisy ran upstairs, closed her door, and jumped onto her bed, looking distraught. She didn't understand why Lisa would lie to her. Was she just afraid that she would be criticized? Colton leaned against her door outside. You silly girl, haven't you realized that Lisa has changed? Daisy sat up, looked toward him, and bit her lip. That's impossible. Why would she change? Colton walked over with his arms crossed. Everyone changes. She's still Lisa, just not the one you used to know. Daisy fell quiet. Colton placed her shell bracelet on the desk, and she was surprised. Didn't I give this to Lisa? Yes, I picked it up. Picked up meant that Lisa had thrown it away. Daisy paused, her eyes staring at the bracelet on the desk. She would be lying if she said that she didn't mind the present she had made being thrown away. Daisy didn't sleep well that night because of that. She rested on the desk and didn't know how to face Lisa like she used to. Daisy, Lisa called out to her from outside the classroom. Daisy snapped back to the present, calmed herself down, and walked over to her. Lisa, have you spoken to your mom? Lisa interrupted while looking at her hopefully. Daisy looked down and asked after a moment, Lisa, was it really unintentional? Lisa's smile dropped. What do you mean? We're friends, right, Lisa? Tell me the truth, and I'll try to figure something out. Before she could finish, Lisa's expression changed. Do you think that I'm lying? That's not what I meant. What did you mean then, Daisy? You agreed to help me. Lisa was anxious. I'm running out of time. Everyone is criticizing me. You're the only person who can help me now. Daisy looked at Lisa's wrist. Why was the bracelet that I gave you with Colton? Lisa's expression froze, and she avoided eye contact with Daisy in silence. Daisy took a deep breath. Lisa, I want to help, but I've watched the video, and I know you're afraid of being criticized. Uncle Helios won't blame you if you apologize. Forget it. Lisa's face dropped, and she looked unfriendly. If you don't want to help, then just say so. There's no need for all these excuses. I guess I've seen the real you now. She turned and left. Daisy froze on the spot and didn't know how to react. Lisa never went to see Daisy after that, and even if they bumped into each other, Lisa pretended that she didn't see her and just walked past her. Everyone who saw that would ask, Daisy, did you have an argument with Lisa? They all knew that Lisa was close to Daisy. Daisy lowered her head and didn't answer. She didn't know why Lisa would turn into a person like that. Chapter 1388. When Daisy got back to her classroom and took out her phone as she wanted to text Lisa to explain. After sending the message, however, she realized that she was blocked. Lisa, who had blocked her, didn't know what her mistake was and thought that Daisy would explain herself to her. She did that just so that Daisy would feel anxious. Daisy cherished their friendship, so she must have been feeling upset. Lisa was going to wait for Daisy to beg her to be friends again. She deleted all the bad comments about her and tweeted, after a few days, during gym class, Daisy went to the library. She was feeling terrible because she was blocked, so she tried reading to feel better. She stood in front of the shelves and flipped through a book when she faintly heard someone say, "Are you still ignoring Daisy?" "Yes, aren't you best friends?" Daisy placed the book back on the shelf, quietly walked next to them, and stuck her head out. She saw Lisa and two other friends there. Lisa was flipping through a book as she said, "She will come and see me even if I ignore her." The two students looked at each other but were curious. "You're confident about that?" Lisa sniggered. "I'm her only friend other than her brother. Who else can she go to?" "That's true. It feels like Daisy kept hanging around you." "Haha, you know what everyone says about her. She doesn't have friends other than Lisa." Lita turned to look at them, seemingly happy. "Is that really what they say?" The friend replied, "Yes, they say that the boys all love to stick around her because she's pretty, but her brother Coleman doesn't let them near her because it's very easy for the boys to trick her." Another girl laughed. "Daisy does look naive and easy to trick." Daisy, who was hiding behind a shelf, turned and left. She was running out of the library without looking and bumped into someone. Zafir immediately grabbed her. "Daisy?" Daisy pushed him away without saying anything and ran away. The other boys who were with him were confused. What happened to her? Zafir looked at Daisy, who was getting further and further away, and frowned while deep in thought. She ran to the rooftop and cried her heart out. After a long time, Colton suddenly appeared next to her with tissues in hand. She paused and looked toward him with red eyes. "Colton." Colton helplessly squatted down and wiped her tears. "You're too old to be crying." She fell into his arms and cried even louder. Colton patted her back to calm her in silence. She choked. "Am I dumb? Why did they have to say that about me? What did I do wrong?" Colton frowned. "You are silly. Real friends take care of each other and don't keep talking about your flaws. You were doing your best to protect this friendship, but it didn't mean anything to her. People who treat you as a friend wouldn't forget about you even if you didn't reach out to them. Some people are not meant to be lifelong friends, so there's no need to force it. She showed up in your life and taught you a lesson, and you learned. We're still young, so we'll meet a lot more people in the future. We'll have more choices, but those who stay till the end are the true friends." Chapter 1389. In the evening, Lisa stood at the school gate when school ended because she wanted to wait for Daisy to speak to her. She decided that if Daisy spoke to her first, she would forgive her, and Daisy would be afraid of losing her. Daisy walked out of the school and paused when she saw Lisa standing under the signboard. Lisa saw Daisy but ignored her because she thought she would come to her anyway. But suddenly, a group of people rushed over. "That's her." They approached Daisy, who didn't react in time and was shoved to the ground. Lisa was stunned and was going over when the woman with a mask took out her phone and kept yelling, "Traitor," while filming. How could you leak Helios information when he treats you so well? Does your father know that you're a traitor? Daisy had no idea what was going on, and her mind went blank while the people were scolding her and taking photos. What are you doing? The teacher ran over with the guard while the students stood around and started chattering. Colton saw that and immediately ran toward Daisy and stood in front of her. What are you doing to my sister? She betrayed Helios. Yes, the person who posted the video clarified that Daisy asked her to take her video. How could a little girl use Helios to go viral and expose his daughter? That's so disrespectful. They were all Helios fans who immediately went to the school after reading the clarification post. They didn't care who Daisy was, she had to take responsibility for what she had done. Colton helped Daisy up. Her head was hung low, and she was silent. Colton glared at them. You should go ask Helios Boucher if my sister actually did this. The fans stopped and stared at each other. Colton looked through the crowd at Lisa, who was looking pale and shaking. How did this happen? She had just wanted to clear the air so they would stop cursing her, so she threw Daisy under the bus. Helios fans would probably forgive her because she was so close to him, but she didn't expect the fans to come over and attack Daisy. The teachers shooed the students away and walked toward the fans. This is a school. We will not allow you to do this to our students. Leave now, or I'll call the police. The fans weren't happy about it, so they glared at Daisy and mouthed traitor, snitch, and so on while leaving. Daisy froze while Colton hugged her. She wanted to cry, but no tears came out. The car that was there to pick them up was parked at the gate, so Colton walked her over. After she got in, he turned toward Lisa. Lisa's heart dropped, and she didn't dare look at him while she held her fist until the car drove away. At the dining table, Maisie heard about Daisy being attacked by Helios fans at school and immediately put down her cutlery. I told you not to spoil Daisy. She couldn't even tell when she was being manipulated. Chapter 1390. Nolan and Nicholas continued having dinner and didn't dare say anything. Maisie got up and went upstairs. Nicholas looked at Nolan. Did you hear what your wife said? You can't spoil Daisy anymore. Nolan was casual about it. You sound like you haven't been spoiling her. Nicholas pressed his lips together. That was his granddaughter. They had everything, so there was nothing wrong with giving whatever his grandchildren wanted to them. Daisy grew up with all the protection they could give, so once she left her safety bubble, she wouldn't be able to survive. She was naive when it came to worldly issues and didn't know how to speak to people. She was too innocent, and if Colton weren't at their school to look after her, she wouldn't even know that she was manipulated. However, this incident helped her mature a little, or at least she now understood that friendships shouldn't be maintained through benefits. That would be more of a transaction, and even if it was a transaction, both parties should have received equal benefits, just like a business deal. Maisie stood in front of Daisy's room and knocked. There was no reply. She opened the door and saw that it was dark inside. Daisy was curled up behind the curtains and leaned against the door with saddened eyes. Maisie's heart ached when she saw that. She walked toward her and leaned down to look into her eyes. Daisy, you should cry if you're feeling sad. Daisy shook her head. I don't want to cry. She thought that crying was tiring, and there were no tears left after crying for a long time. Don't cry then. Maisie raised her hand and touched her head. I didn't cry when I was in a worse situation. This isn't too bad. Daisy blinked but didn't say anything. Daisy, you're a lot luckier than I was. You have a grandfather who loves you, your brothers and father, and me. Your grandmother passed away a long time ago, and your maternal grandfather didn't love me when I was young. I've gone through all the hardship alone, and I was young and never loved. I couldn't just cuddle up to someone like you do. Maisie slowly stood up and pulled the curtains away so light could shine into the room. Everyone needs to grow, and it doesn't usually go smoothly. You were really happy when you were children, but now you're in junior high school and have your own ideas. When you get into high school and college and then out into the world, you will meet more people and understand that everyone has their own problems. You have an advantage over the others, and many people grew up with a disadvantage, but everyone is equal. You can't wish that they're all like you. Lisa, for example, you need to get to know her better if you want to be her friend instead of making her happy with what you think will work by giving her gifts. Those gifts were a burden to her family. Maisie turned to look at her. There is always greed in people, do you understand? Daisy pressed her lips together and got up after a while. Mom, I want to see Lisa. The car was parked in the suburbs, and the sky was turning dark. The street lamps started turning on when Daisy stood in front of the car. She hesitated for a long time before deciding to go see Lisa.